everyone. Thanks for coming out. So, how many business students do we have in the room? Any? All right. How many business people do we have in the room? Any? Yes. So, I am a business person, and I guess that still kind of sticks in my throat when I say it. And I think if I were back at University of Michigan where I attended school and somebody would have told me you're going to end up being a business person, I would have kind of done one of these. To me, the word business was like a four-letter word most of my life. So I guess that's one message that I want to leave with you tonight, that I did not intend to be a business person the rest of my life. And the other one is that I didn't set out to be a heroine or save people's lives or be about I can save the world. I just kind of followed my heart through my business and took like one day at a time and made what I believe were some really common sense decisions about the problems that I had to solve every day. And this is kind of where I've ended up. And I'm really proud of where I've ended up, and I'm really scared of where I've ended up and whatever. So I'll tell you how it all started. It all started with me running around I dropped out of Michigan's business school to take a job working for a local organic food company in 1978, which was called Eden Foods, and it was a manufacturer. Does anybody lactose intolerant know what Eden soy is, soy milk? So we helped launch that first Eden product, and I worked there for 10 years. And when I first dropped out of Michigan's business school to take that job, it was kind of like, well, do I want to go in debt for 20 years and go to business school, or do I want to get paid to go to business school at this little fledgling natural food company? And I ate all their food anyway, so it was like, oh, this is going to be a great deal. And I sort of thought I'd do it until I was ready to go back to business school, and of course the rest is history. But anyway, the first thing that happened when I worked there is I went to an organic bean farm in the thumb of Michigan. It's actually near Bay City. And something happened to me on the field. Has anyone toured an organic farm or set foot on an organic field? I really urge you all to do it. I was from the city. I didn't know much about farmland, but what I did know of farmland was that you walked on it and it felt like you were walking on cement. But then I went to Ernie's farm in Bay City, and he had like 80 acres of beans. He was growing pintos and soybeans. And I walked into the field in between the rows, and the first thing that happened was I sunk in on the dirt up to the tops of my shoes. And it was like spongy, and it was like a really different feeling for me. And then I started seeing all these birds flying and all these insects flying, and I just got this rush of energy. Like, it sounds really hocus pocusy, I realize, but it was just like, this isn't farmland, like something else is going on here. And since that time, I've probably taken hundreds of people through walks of organic farms. And the usual reaction, really, the typical reaction I get from people is they get into the field and they go like this. Like they just kind of get some energy from the earth. And so it sort of all started to come together for me, and I worked really hard to sell all of Ernie's beans and to sell everybody else's beans who was growing organically. And 10 years later, I started working for a company called Little Bear Organic Food, and we made organic tortilla chips. Simplest thing in the world. You know, organic corn, salt, and organic oil, and 4 hours later, and you have a chip. And amongst other chips, we launched a blue corn tortilla chip. Has everyone had blue corn chips? You know what I'm talking about. Well, back in the early 90s, blue corn chips were kind of weird. I mean, nobody really served them at Super Bowl parties yet. It was just kind of a new thing. But our blue corn was gaining momentum, and we were having this problem at the point of production, and that was that when we first harvested the corn and we first made the chips were this really dark, rich blue color, and they were almost violet. They were very appealing. But as we stored the grain in the grain bins at the production facility, the corn bleached out. It just got lighter and lighter and lighter. Because we made a fresh masa chip, which meant that as part of the production, we grind the corn. We start with grinding the corn. So the lighter the corn was, the lighter the chip was, and selling blue chips were hard enough, but selling gray chips were kind of almost impossible. And by the end of the growing season, we were literally selling gray chips. So that year, as every year, I went down to the farm to inspect the field with the certifier who certified the crop as organic. And we had tried various things at the point of production, exchanging oil for water and doing different things with the timing of the production to see if we could get the corn chips to keep this blue rich color. Nothing was working. So at the farm visit that year, I had a checklist of things I wanted to go over with the farmer, and I said, Jim, this blue corn chips that we're selling, I mean, they're doing well, but they're just bleaching out and they're becoming light, and we've tried all these things. Is there something you can do in the field that can help the corn keep its color? So Jim got this little gleam in his eye and said, I know exactly what I'll do, and I can fix the problem. And all I did was check that off and move on to my next problem, or my next issue. All I knew was Jim was going to fix the problem. Turns out what Jim decided to do to fix the problem was to put plant cotton into his crop rotation. Now, does everyone understand that organic farmers don't grow the same crop every year, because that's how you strip the soil of nutrients? So you don't monoculture. You have a 3-year rotation, 4-year rotation, depending on the farmer. And Jim decided that corn really robs the soil of nitrogen, and that cotton doesn't, and that if he planted cotton the season before the corn, it might help his corn crop keep its color. It turns out years later, and we were kind of talking about this at dinner, because there were other crops that could have done the same thing for him, but it turns out his grandpa was a cotton farmer, and he was in an area of Texas where they didn't really grow much cotton anymore. So I think there was more romance in this kind of conclusion that Jim thought he would try. But nonetheless, he planted 50 acres of cotton that year, and all I knew was he was going to fix the problem, moved on. So he called me in the spring and said, my cotton experiment is working, the cotton crop seems to be taken. I said, that's great, good for you. Called me a couple months later, and he said, this cotton's going to yield a crop. And I said, okay. And he said, and you're going to sell it for me. And I said, Jim, I sell food. And he said, but Benet, it's organic. And I was like, Jim, you still can't eat it. And I can't put it in salsa, I can't make a chip out of it. And he was like, no, you have to sell this crop for me. Well, as it turns out, by then, the woman I had started working for at Little Bear, we had doubled sales twice in about a year and a half, and she sold out. And she made a few $1 million. So she said to me, hey, you helped make me all this money. I'll start a new business and you can be a partner. So we were kind of looking for a new business. And then Jim showed up with his cotton crop. And so it was still really weird, but we started researching cotton. And we found out what probably some of you, I would hazard a guess, know by now, which is that cotton is not so natural after all. In fact, cotton is the second most pesticide-laden crop in the world. If you take all the world's cultivated land, cotton's grown on maybe 3 or 4 or 5% of that land, depending on the year. Cotton uses 25% of the year's insecticides every year and 10% of the year's pesticides every year. So the implications of getting cotton to all be organic would be getting so many pesticides out of our life, out of our world. And by the way, some people will argue these points now because there's a lot of things going on with GMOs, but I believe coffee is the most pesticide-laden crop in the world, cotton is the second most pesticide-laden crop, and tobacco is the third most pesticide-laden crop. And if we could remove pesticides from those 3 crops and only ever get organic tobacco, organic coffee, and organic cotton, we would save the earth of 2/3 of the world's pesticides. So it's an enormous environmental thing. So what did we do? We had this desire to start a new business. We had, Jennifer just sold the company, so she had a few $1 million. And we had Jim, we had the source of raw material. So, of course, we started a business. So what do we do? Well, we go out and buy all of Jim's cotton. In fact, we prepay for it 2 months before he's going to harvest it. And then we start talking to all the other organic farmers we know, because it's a pretty small industry back then. And we say, hey, can you grow cotton? Do you think you can grow cotton into your crop rotation? Of course, they all thought we were nuts. And beyond all of this, we didn't know anything about the fiber world. We didn't know anything about the apparel world. We didn't know what a convoluted production system it was. And we had no idea how to make anything in the business. So, like I said, we were used to tortilla chips, where you source organic corn, organic oil, and sea salt, and 4 hours later you go to a co-packer and you say, make me these chips to these specs, and they make them, and you've got chips, and you're in business. Well, cotton, on the other hand, you harvest it out of the ground. First thing you have to do is gin it, which takes all the field trash and the sticks and stuff out of it. That's where you lose 60% of it by weight. So 60% of your harvest is just gone. The 40% that remains you have to send to a spinner, where they use all these different harsh waxes that are insoluble, and they spin it into all these different counts of yarn. Certain counts go into knit goods like this, certain counts go into woven goods, other counts are for socks. It's very complicated. Then you send the yarn from there to a knitter, in our case, who knits it into stretchy fabric. We make knit goods. And then they send it to a finishing house, and the finishing house adds formaldehyde and all these heavy-duty chemicals that are completely polluting environments where clothing is made. And then finally it goes to a cut-and-sew house, and the cut-and-sew house takes the fabric and cuts it according to your pattern and sews it. So even just to make this basic T-shirt that's in the middle here, which is like the most basic American garment you can make, it takes 6 to 8 weeks. There's 5 steps involved. These are all contractors who you pay separately, and there's loss at every level. So, needless to say, we were in way over our heads. Those of you who are in business school, this is not the way to start a business. Just put a big no by this. We invested several $100,000, didn't have a product, spent about 1.5 years researching how to make a product, and then realized that we were probably destined to fail. But I was committed, and I quit my job, and so we started with socks. And we started with socks because there were still sock manufacturers left in the United States. Socks were a little bit easier. You didn't have 4 sizes. You only had 2 sizes to fit most consuming adults. And they were small, and they were impulse-driven. And bottom line is we could guilt trip all our friends who were in the natural product industry into carrying our socks. So we showed up in 1992 at the biggest trade show in the industry, which is now called the Natural Products Expo. It occurs every year. In fact, it's next week in Anaheim, California, and there's all these innovative, cool products that come out of it. It's a fun show to go to. It's a trade show, so you have to get credentials to get in, but if any of you ever want to go, it's a really fun show to go to. But at the time, it was called the Natural Foods Expo because the natural products industry was pretty young, and the only products that were being made were food products. So we showed up at the Natural Food Expo, and we had a wall of socks behind us. Now, there were probably 10,000 independent natural food stores in the country at the time. Since then, a lot of them have been bought out and they've become chains, et cetera, et cetera. But at the time of the 10,000, I probably knew 8,000 of them just because I had been in this industry and it was small. In year after year after year, I'd see all these people at trade shows. And I have to tell you, we were pretty much laughed out of the trade show pavilion. Like, people would come up and just like look at us like, are you crazy? Like, what are you doing, you know? And the way we marketed our socks was we had these really heavy packaging all over them. We had cardboard layer after layer with inserts in it that told the story of if you knew what you were wearing when you were wearing natural cotton, you'd go back to wearing polyester, and cotton's so bad for the environment and it's terrible, and you have to buy our socks because they're clean. So, but we succeeded to a degree. I mean, we did guilt trip our friends. Our friends all thought we were crazy, and we just made them give us budgets, and we started writing orders, and we put little racks in stores, and we started gradually getting more and more business. And then we started making T-shirts. And the reason so our company at that point was mission-based to a degree, and our mission was to convert as many acres of conventional cotton to organic. Okay, we wanted people to make this segue and convert. And by the way, organic cotton is grown to the same standards as organic food. So you all know the National Organic Rule and 3 years and certification, all that. If any of the cotton in our product is grown to that same standard. So we had a base of which to claim that this stuff was, better for the environment, etc. We did not market as being better for human beings. Though we got a lot of anecdotal stories from people who said, one time this woman emailed me in my office, 3 generations, her daughter, her, and her mother all had athlete's foot, really terrible athlete's foot. And she was like, I've tried all silk hose, and I've tried wool hose, and I've tried cotton hose, and nothing works for me, but I put on your socks, and now I don't have athlete's foot. Why is that? So I still don't have the scientific data, which is what we need, to prove any of this. So it's all anecdotal information, but your skin's your biggest organ, and it breathes. So, and you sleep in your clothes, and you wear your clothes for hours and hours, and you sweat in your clothes, or some of us do, and whatever. So basically, we started just marketing as being better for the environment and converting acreage. More acreage we convert, the more successful we felt we would be. So then we started making T-shirts. So here's a typical American T-shirt. It doesn't even have any side seams. It's 2 sleeves stuck into a neck or into a body and then a rib neck, right? You've all seen them. You probably have too many of them. We all have too many of these. They're the great disposable American garment. We started making T-shirts because one of our friends in the industry who made organic juice came up to me at a show and said, wow, wouldn't it be great if I could advertise my organic juice with an organic T-shirt? And I was like, ding, ding, ding. A way to convert more acreage. The typical American T-shirt uses about 1/2 pound of cotton. Takes about 1/2 pound of cotton to make the shirt. Takes about 1/3 of a pound of pesticides to make the shirt. So, of course, disposable American t-shirts, concert tees, rock band tees, event tees. We were like, great, we can just sell everybody t-shirts and convert the world. And we started to. We sold, the Indigo Girls bought all their t-shirts from us, and the Free Tibet concert tee. You know, any concerts with a cause, people bought their shirts from us. Church groups bought their shirts from us for mission trips, etc. And Ben & Jerry's ice cream started buying all their shirts from us. Ben heard the story. It was when Ben and Jerry still owned the company. Ben Cohen heard the story and thought, I've got to convert all of our t-shirts to organic because we've been doing the wrong thing and this is environmentally bad and we're supposed to be good people and whatever. So they started buying a lot of t-shirts from us. Like they bought 80,000, 100,000 shirts in a year, and that was big business for us. And they became like 40% of our sales, and t-shirts became like 60% of our sales. So all of our production was done in the United States, and the great exodus of American apparel industry had already started. Like the U.S. apparel industry priced itself out of the market. It was a labor issue, and it was an environmental issue as well, and a lot of people don't understand this, but the reason initially that there's all this groundwater pollution, especially from cotton, because cotton's very oily, and dyes are made from water, so what happens when you put oil and water together, right? They repel each other. So up to 60% of the dye that you add to cotton ends up in the groundwater. It doesn't even end up on the clothing because it can't stick. So we were doing all of our dyeing in the U.S. and all of our cutting and sewing in the U.S. and all of our sock making in the U.S., but it was hard to do because the industry was under stress. It was under duress because it was already going to Mexico because of labor and environmental rules. That's what people don't understand. The local EPA chapters in the southeast United States, where most of my sewing contracts were, man, the EPA would be out at these plants like weekly, and they'd be checking their containment water of their effluent water of their plants, and they would only allow them to release the water into separately contained pipes, oftentimes that went to their local community water processing center, and it was further processed before it was allowed to go out. Well, in countries like Mexico and Nicaragua and Guatemala, you could do whatever you wanted with groundwater, and there's groundwater contamination around many, many apparel plants around the world. So it was hard for us to get contractors that were good, that were still in business, but we managed to get a few of them. And what would happen typically once we did t-shirt orders were time sensitive, right? They were for a concert, they were for an event. If you have to ship 8,000 shirts to Madison Square Garden in time for a concert, you've got to get them there in time for the concert, not too early, not too late. So it was time sensitive, but we were controlling all of our raw materials. We bought our own cotton from the farm. We spun our own yarn. You know, we had it spun to our specs. We had it knit to our specs. We had it dyed to our specs. So I would walk into a t-shirt company in Alabama, let's say, and I would see 700 sewing machines. And of the 700 sewing machines, 500 of them would have their chairs flipped over and have dust on them this thick because they didn't have enough contracts to keep their workers in business. So I'd say, hey, I've got this organic fabric and and I need 10,000 shirts within 2 weeks. Can you do it? Here's my fabric. Oh, yeah, no problem. We can do that. We've got the workers. We've got the machines. This is an easy garment, whatever. So 2 weeks. 3 weeks would come, no shirts. 3.5 weeks would come, no shirts. And then I get the shirts in, and they'd be flawed. They'd be terrible production. There'd be threads all over them. I'd say you have to use cotton thread. You have to use cotton thread. And they'd use polyester thread. Well, polyester thread doesn't take a dye the same way cotton takes a dye. So wherever they used polyester thread, I'd have a little white stripe here on this blue shirt. One time I got 1,000 shirts in, and they literally had an inch of skip stitches right here. I mean, this is the most basic garment you can sew, and they couldn't sew. It's like they skipped an inch. I mean, I couldn't figure it out. I couldn't get it. I was in this industry where I was a welcome customer, even though I was weird. I was a woman. I was from the north. I was, organic, whatever. But I was giving them a real business, and they had all these sewing machines, and they had all these workers, and I had this really basic garment, and they couldn't sew it on time, and they couldn't sew good quality. So I started spending more and more time in the plants, like what's wrong with this picture? Why isn't this working? And what did I find out? Well, I found out that who sews our clothes. And this is true around the world. People who sew our clothes are women. There are very, very, very few men in apparel plants. Usually the cutters are men who run the equipment, the big cutting equipment. The sewers are all women. They're undereducated women. They're single women. They're heads of households. They do the same job year after year after year because they get paid by the piece. So they don't get paid by the hour. They get paid by the piece. And the owner of the plant determines how many pieces you make to make minimum wage. So it's this particular pattern and this particular fabric with this particular thread. You have to sew 200 pieces in order to get minimum wage. Anything you sew over 200 pieces, you get a per piece rate, 7 cents, 3 cents, 5 cents, whatever it is. So you can make unlimited amount of money, but the owner always or the manager sets the piecework per diem rate. So what I really got from spending time in these plants was that it's women, undereducated, who are totally disenfranchised from our world, who are sewing our clothes. And, oh, by the way, they do the same job year after year after year because they're paid by the piece. And so if they're a sleeve hemmer, they get really good at sleeve hemming. So if somebody tries to say, okay, now let's do a set sleeving, they don't want to move production because their income's going to take a hit, huge hit. Like their kids aren't going to be able to be fed. So they end up being sleeve hemmers the rest of their lives. So what happens to them? They get neck problems, they get back problems, they get carpal tunnel, they get all sorts of problems with their bodies because they do the same job week after week, year after year. So once I realized this, it was, I felt kind of foolish and pretty depressed because I was trying to do a good thing. I was trying to save acres of conventional cotton and convert them to organic. And here I was exploiting all these workers who really didn't have a clue who I was, could have cared less who I was, and I really wasn't making their lives better. So then my company changed direction completely, and it kind of changed direction based on this one experience on this one day, and I'm going to tell you this story, because I call it the light bulb day. And the light bulb day occurred in my office on a Friday. My office is in Ann Arbor, or was at the time. We're in Ypsi now. And it was about this very shirt, which is why I bring it, even though it's a little bit dog-eared. It was about the band Fish. Everybody know who Fish is, or most people, who are back together and on tour? I plug Fish. And they were doing a benefit. Ben & Jerry's and Fish were in the same town, Burlington, Vermont. You may have known those guys, went to school at University of Vermont. Ben Cohen was in love with the band. He decided to launch a flavor of ice cream called Fish Food. Has anybody had Fish Food? Wonderful, incredible. Gotta try it. Chocolate fudge fish floating around in the ice cream. It's great. So they had launched Fish Food ice cream, and they had decided that Fish decided, the band, that they were going to have a concert to clean up Lake Champlain. Benefit concert. So Ben Cohen decided this is a great time to promote the ice cream flavor because it's brand new, and we'll do a T-shirt, custom T-shirt, just for this concert. You can only get the T-shirt at the concert. Perfect, right? So we met with the band, and we went back and forth on design, and we went back and forth on colors, and half the band wanted this color, and half the band wanted this kind of lavender color that was lighter than this. It was kind of a pink lavender, and they were arguing, and finally I said, guys, the shirt is blue, because if I don't start making the dye dip of the fabric, there are going to be no shirts. So, let's go. So it was blue shirts, and I don't know how many shirts there were for this order. It was like in the neighborhood of 10 or 12,000 shirts, but it was a custom run, just that color. So we had to go through this special process of dyeing, whatever. And so I got, the light bulb day happened in my office on a Friday. I got two calls pretty much in rapid succession of each other. The first call at my office was from this guy who had managed the Ben & Jerry's ice cream scoop shop in Burlington, Vermont. And he very excitedly told me that the concert tickets were selling off the charts, that there was a lineup around the block for concert tickets, that the band had just announced a second show because the first show had sold out, and that the ice cream flavor was selling like nuts, and where were his T-shirts? And the next, because he wanted demo shirts to show everybody, you got to come to the concert to get the shirt. And the very next call I got, or one of the next calls I got, was from Neil. And Neil was the owner of the sew shop who I had contracted to make these 10,000 or 12,000 shirts. And whenever Neil called, there was trouble. So I picked up the phone I was all excited because this guy just called and the concert, everything's going well. I said, Neil, what's up? And he said, well, them blue shirts for that special order you got? And I said, yeah, the concert, that's a concert, I got to have those shirts. He goes, well, we're not going to make that deadline. And I'm like, Neil, I have to have the shirts on time. Remember, they're for a concert. We've gone over this before. Concerts mean, no, I just know we're not going to have the shirts on time. And I was like, Neil, I've got to have the shirts on time. Ben & Jerry's, now my heart's kind of palpitating. And I'm like, Ben & Jerry's is like half my sales almost. This is Ben Cohen's personal project. We've got to have those shirts. Well, I just know we can't make it because, the sleeve hammer was broken and now it's fixed. But then so-and-so's kid has a runny nose and she didn't come to work. And, he's just going on and on with all these stories. Finally, he said, Neil, you just got to speed it up. Call more workers. We got to get that order. And he said, well, I already know we just can't do it. We just can't do it. And I said, well, why can't we do it? And he said, well, we've never sewn more than 1,000 shirts a day. And he said at this point, we'd have to sew 1,100 shirts every day, work a half a day on Saturday, and just to get the order. And I don't think I can get so-and-so and so-and-so to work on Saturday. And I was like, Neil. So I hung up the phone, and I did what I say any semi-sane person in my position would have done who didn't have a second or third story window to jump out of. And that is that I drove to Metro Airport in Detroit, and I flew to Tennessee, the nearest airport to this guy's plant in Alabama, and I rented a car, and I drove 3.5 hours to the guy's plant, and I virtually walked in the door and jumped into the production line. And I started trying to do anything I could do to speed up production. I mean, I was trimming threads on sleeves, and I was flipping sleeves inside out, and I was delivering bundles to the setters, and I was trying to help with the hemming, and I was just doing stuff. And the women, there were all women in that plant except one man, and the women who were sewing, they didn't really, I mean, they kind of looked at me funny out of the corner of their eyes. They didn't really speak to me. They didn't really get angry with me because I was kind of speeding up production. They just kind of looked at me funny, and I'd say, oh, let me do that for you, let me hand you these bundles, let me do this, and can I sweep the floor, and whatever. But Neil, of course, he talked to me. Neil started basically asking me what I was doing in his plant, and telling me to get out of his plant. And I said, Neil, I told you I got to have this order. I can't be without this order. I've got to have it. So I'm just going to be here, and I'm going to help, and just don't pay any attention to me, blah, blah, blah. Well, he kept getting more and more upset, and I kept staying and doing more and more work. And the more work I did, the more upset he got. And by the middle of the first day, he kind of said, if you don't get out of here, I'm going to take your stuff off the line. I'm not even going to finish the order, and I'm going to put so-and-so's whatever product in the line, and you're not going to have your shirts. And I just kept on delivering bundles and kind of trying to get people all jazzed. Can you work a little faster on those and whatever? And then I got a hotel room, and I showed up the next morning. And now he was angry. He was upset. The guy was not happy. And by this time, he was like, I thought I told you to get out of here. You're disrupting my plant, blah, blah, blah. And I said, Neil, I can't leave without my order. You know this story. And can I just talk to these women? Would you just let me talk to these women and tell them why this is so important to me and what it's about and da-da-da. And he was like, he kept saying the same thing, which is, nope, can't talk to these women. These are my women. Can't talk to these women. My women. But I stayed. And so finally, he was very agitated, and I said, look, if you want to call the police, you can get me physically removed from your plant. But short of that, I'm not leaving here without my shirts. So get used to it. So, and I kept saying, and can I just let me talk to him? Just let me tell him why I'm here. So finally, the bell rang. Now, in textile plants that I've been in throughout the Southeast, I've never done work in LA in the West. Southeastern United States, it's like they imported school bells into these textile facilities. So the high school bell that rang to tell you it was between classes, those are the bells that are in these textile plants. And they ring the bells when it's time to start work and when it's time to go to lunch and when it's time to have your break. So the 3 o'clock bell rang, and that meant it's break time. And so you get 15 minutes to go to the bathroom or smoke a cigarette or whatever you do on your break. So the bell rang, and Neil looked up and said, you got 5 minutes. Which I assumed meant I get to talk to these women. So I started just talking. So I held up, a bunch of different logos and things that I have, the artwork, and I said, you're sewing these shirts, and they're not just cotton, they're organic cotton. And these women were like, whatever. And then I said, and this is a really special order. It's for this band called Fish. And it was like silence. And I said, and they're really gifted musicians, and they're this jam band, and they're getting this national following, and they're from Burlington, Vermont, and they went to school there. And, well, they're doing this concert, and every dollar they make from this concert is going to go to clean up this Lake Champlain. Nothing. So I said, and there's this huge lake, and there's this town. And, if you lived in the town, your whole economy, the whole economy of the town is dependent upon the lake. And your kids would swim in the lake, and you would get fish out of the lake. I mean, it's like you can't have the town without the lake. And the lake's really polluted. And every dollar they do this concert, they're gonna use it to clean up this lake. And so I already know you guys can't get this order done on time. I already know we're way behind. And I already know that you can't sew more than 1,000 shirts in a day. And I already know that you'd have to sew 1,100 shirts in order to make this order, but I just want you to know I'm going to be here, I'm going to help you, and anything you can do to help me get this order on time, it's really important, blah, 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 blah. I just kept going on. Well, the women didn't sew 1,100 shirts that day. The women sewed 1,200 shirts that day. The women sewed 1,250 shirts the next day. We got the order shipped complete, every size, perfect, on Friday, no work on Saturday, and as we loaded the last box together on the truck, we were all hooting and hollering and high-fiving. And it was a really remarkable story because it wasn't so much that we got the order done on time, it was that I would watch these women, and they would be like working through their break, or like cutting their lunch in half, and they'd have a phone under their ear and thimbles on their fingers, and they would be saying things like, well, you'll just have to make a peanut butter sandwich for dinner. I can't come home. I have a lake to save. They actually said, I have a lake to save. You see, they didn't say, my boss is making me work overtime. They didn't say, there's this Looney Tune woman from Michigan who's, running around like a nutcase saying she's got to have these T-shirts. They said, I have a lake to save. And it was like the most profound thing for me to see what we had done because they were shaving a lake. And they were poor women who could barely feed their families. And then the other part of the story, the kind of buzzkill of the whole story, was that the owner, Neil, was in his office with his calculator going, 1,250 shirts, new production goal. So you see, the end result for those women was their quotas would be raised. So they would have to end up sewing more sleeves in to get the same rate of pay after they just accomplished this pretty enormous thing. Well, that guy was out of business within 6 months. He didn't pay the IRS. And that's when we started losing contractors to bankruptcy. We actually lost 5 contractors within a period of a year and a half who either went bankrupt or had to shut the door or whatever. And it was more than once that I would get a call in my office on a Friday afternoon from a sew shop manager or owner who'd say, come get your stuff because it's half cut and I can't finish it. I'm closing down this weekend and not reopening. I'm going to start liquidating my equipment on Monday. So I'd fly down to some place, drive for hours, rent a van, load up my cut goods, find another sew shop that was around the corner or a few miles away, and camp out on their doorstep till Monday morning and beg them to finish the order. Please, can you finish this order? I've got to have it by Friday or whatever. So it was at that point in time that I said to my production manager, we're not going to make it if we stay onshore. As much as I don't want to go offshore with our sewing of our apparel, we can't do this anymore because these people are going down and they're taking us with them. So as kind of shocked as I was at the conditions in the apparel plants in the United States, I was super fearful of what would happen if we went offshore. By that time, Mexico had even lost contracts to Guatemala and to Honduras and to Nicaragua. And from there, the textile industry actually ended up going to Africa because those Central American countries could not compete. And from now Africa can't compete, and of course it's all in Asia, and 90% of what you buy today is probably made in Asia. So I said to my production manager, how are we going to go offshore and not go to a sweatshop? Like, what do we do? And so now I'm going to let the video tell you the story of what we chose to do, because it tells it much better than me, and this is about a 15-minute film.
Well, we're women. And I said, yeah. And they said, well, we don't do this kind of work. And I said, then it won't get built. And for about a week, things were looking like they might just all come undone. The women cried, they cursed, they cajoled, and finally, after about a week, they showed up one day and said, well, let's get started.
Cuando nosotros venimos aquí, esto era un previo vacío, montoso, bien sucio. Entonces tuvimos primeramente que limpiar, y cuando ya tomamos las medidas de cómo iba, empezamos a acabar para hacer los hoyos donde van cada poste de los pilares, y fue bien duro.
El trabajo de la construcción es muy duro, yo no lo había hecho antes. A veces cuando estuvimos piqueteando la loseta para rellenarla de mezcla, muchas veces nos pringaba los ojos de cuestiones de cemento, y eso arde mucho la mezcla. Pero sí, yo lo hacía con la única idea de que iba a tener un trabajo después de tanto tiempo que yo no había tenido un trabajo, y entonces la idea de tener un lugar donde yo iba a trabajar y decir mi trabajo, eso me alegraba mucho, y de esa manera no era tan difícil hacer el trabajo.
A veces nos sentíamos inseguras, había un momento bien difícil, y nosotros nos poníamos a la hora del almuerzo, tanto que estamos trabajando y no sabemos si esto en realidad va a llegar a funcionar. Ya cuando nosotros miramos nuestro galerón terminado y con máquinas dentro del galerón, pues, señal que vamos a trabajar, y seguimos viniendo. Sí.
This is an opportunity for business to form an alliance with groups that traditionally have tried to serve the poor, like Jubilee House, foundations that are interested in development. This is an experiment that responds to all of those sectors' interest. And it's an interesting collaboration between business, foundations, and NGOs.
The second garment that they've been able to sew for us is this string top camisole. It's an upscale garment, and everybody, including the guy who bought the equipment up in the U.S., said to me, you can't take the machinery that we bought these women and take this garment and make these two things happen. This is not going to happen, okay? And forget the fact that these women do not have true sewing experience and blah, blah, blah. Well, they just sold their first 6,600 of these garments, and they're fabulous. They're beautiful. They're incredible quality. We had a lot of startup issues. The first 300 of them don't look so hot, but the last 6,600 look pretty darn good.
Este es primero.
This project is about what we really want to do with our company, and that's just to change the way business is being done. None of us have anything left to be guarded about. This is a true partnership now.
The happiest and the saddest day of my life will be when they say, go away. We don't need you anymore. I hope that they will have internalized what they can verbalize so well, and that is that this is their cooperative, that they own it, that they run it, that they make the decisions, and that they benefit from its success.
Como no sé si esto va a ir a otros países y nos van a oír, nosotros queremos hacerle un llamado a ellos, pues que estamos unas mujeres que necesitamos trabajo. Y nosotros esperamos pues que ellos oigan a las mujeres y nos den trabajo y hablen de nosotros.
Yo lloro de felicidad pues de ver que el esfuerzo no fue en vano el de nosotros. Fue un esfuerzo, dice que la fe mueve montañas y nosotros tuvimos fe.
Ella pues siempre nos va a apoyar, nos va a dar trabajo y le vamos a hacer 37,000 camisetas y eso para nosotros es una alegría.
I think overall they feel a sense of pride, they feel a sense of ownership, and nobody can come in here and take this away from them. Now, it's theirs.
The tenacity of these women, which is mind-blowing, the stick-to-itiveness, the sheer strength of them being such role models for me, and the fact that when you do really bury things, your differences and your egos and your gates, and open them up, you can do anything.
Que la miel